Hello, everyone. I am Daniela Fayer, but this is Andy Lowry. He's the CEO of Epirus, and I want to welcome him to the Defense One stage. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You know, Defense One, we really like to have the perspective of industry, especially after a conversation that we just heard. It's really important to hear from you all. And I want to kind of dive right in with that, because Epirus has been in the news quite a bit of late due to conflicts around the world and your advancements in high-powered microwave for the counter-drone mission. And Dr. Peterkin mentioned this technology. He didn't say too much about it, but for those of us who don't know Epirus and don't know much about that technology, can you tell us a little bit about the company and what you're doing there?
Sure, thank you. So yeah, Dr. Peterkin made mention of directed energy, categorized it laser, microwave, and then double-clicked under microwave to kind of divide between vacuum-based technologies and solid state. Epirus is the leading producer of directed energy microwave leveraging state-of-the-art gallium nitride solid state system in order to kind of combat a growing sort of problem around distributed, highly networked systems like drone swarms. So at the core, I'll back up a little bit now. At the core of what Epirus is we are a non-traditional defense contractor, and that means several things, but in particular, it means that we're positioned or poised to kind of try to combat or assist the DoD in combating today's sort of emerging warfare type, which, if you read the news lately, largely sort of dwells around the idea of asymmetrical or irregular warfare. Prior to me being part of Epirus, I was for years in charge of electronic warfare at Raytheon as the chief engineer in charge of electronic warfare. One of those systems that I was credited as being the architect of was the next generation jammer system for the U.S. Navy. And that system, as well as like our system at Epirus, was a gallium nitride phased array system, high-powered microwave, but its main mission was electronic attack or standoff electronic attack. And back in those times, I remember having a very clear slide that we would show to the Navy. And on the right hand of the side was regular warfare, which was sort of like your traditional IADs and your Chinese, Russian missiles, ground-air missiles, and that sort of thing. And on the right side was asymmetrical, irregular warfare. And it was considered to be adjacent. It was considered to be minor. It was considered to be a small note in 2013. But what it pictured was computers, networks, let's see if I can remember what else, but things that are more in the consumer electronics lane that, if you remember back in 2013, was still very much emerging. It was very much emerging. We didn't have a drone problem. They didn't even picture a drone in the 2013 chart. But today, we don't see the future of war being defined by these types of systems. We see the present war. And where you see these things sort of being defined is around a category. I like to say three things. Everyone has their pencils. They can write down the three things. This type of warfare is defined by heavily leveraging consumer electronics. So these systems basically are built around Qualcomm chips or NVIDIA chips or Intel chips, system on chips. The second thing is they're highly distributed, and to go along with that highly distributed type of system, it's highly networked. So you have a group of warfare threats that confound today's defense systems. They completely confound today's defense systems. We don't know how to deal with them. They're flying sort of metaphorically and literally under the radar, and they're able to be produced and fielded by even non-state actors. So we're not talking about a DoD-laned problem. This lane is much bigger than DoD lane. It can be applied to any sort of hostile actor with or without a country. I mean, you see the Houthis That doesn't mean a domestic actor inside the United States that wanted to do bad things couldn't equally produce a swarm of drones that could create a lot of problems for a stadium or for an airfield. So it's a growing problem, but it's not a problem of the future, it's a problem of today.
Yeah, you're just describing what we're listening to every day with the conflicts that are going around the globe right now. As a matter of fact, I understand that U.S. Army Chief of Staff General Randy George announced just a few weeks ago at a Senate committee that your systems are being sent to CENTCOM like immediately, quotations. So drones are having a strategic impact right now on the battlefield. From your point of view, how do you feel this has changed like air dominance? And like, what are the implications of this?
So I've seen this written, and I guess I would be one that even would endorse what was written about the fact that since the Korean War, we've enjoyed full air dominance in all levels, short range, long range. We've had the privilege of having enough of the right technologies to secure our overseas efforts. Today, I don't think we can make that claim. I think the Tower 23, was it, or 22? I forget which number, out in Jordan that took the lives of 3 American soldiers, and then injured many, many others, by the way, injured about 80 or so other additional American soldiers. I think that one scenario sort of is indicative of how elusive and how much this type of threat, this new type of threat, is evading our current not only weapon systems, aka the Patriot missile system or something like that, but also the sensor systems that are designed to detect, again, much more big sort of think post-Cold War type of systems. They're not designed to pick out tiny little drones in a whole haystack of different background information. So in one essence of the way, or one way you could think about this or define this is that, and I like this word a lot because it's silly sounding, but it's called an OODA loop. You know, if everybody's heard of that. We're confounding the OODA loop. The OODA loop is confounded by this type of irregular warfare because it's a very kind of structured serial system that culminates at the end of its list of things of one weapon going against one threat. They call in the Army serial killers because they go 1 to 1. And that OODA loop is designed at a big picture to kind of behave in that way. Okay, we have a threat. We're finding threats. We found a threat. We hand it off. We're tracking it. We're looking at it. Now we affect it. Now we see if we have any damage and we report back the damage done. Now imagine 1,000 or let's say 5,000 of a thing. I mean, 300 drones being sent into Israel was not a serious even attempt at doing anything really damaging. If they wanted to, they could have sent in 3,000 or 30,000. And at some point, that's going to deplete the arsenal of our traditional systems. It's just going to let us go with all the missiles. And it was very effective, our traditional systems, against the 300 drones. They did a great job at a cost of about $1.5 billion, some estimates say. So it was a very expensive endeavor to go against 300 very cheaply made drones that were sent in, or these ballistic missiles, these poor man ballistic missiles. But the weapon systems that we bring to bear aren't systems that were designed to go after those particular threats. And so what we're looking at is a war right now that we can't win. Our whole, again, OODA loop is designed not to go after this, but not only that, if you think our industrial base, if you think about what we've exercised into, the consumer networked, highly distributed systems have enjoyed this spring bloom, if you will, of having all of this advancement in tech being propelled by consumer dollars, not by DoD dollars. Traditionally, DoD leads the way on new tech. But in this sort of case, consumer land or consumers basically funded these new types of highly distributed network systems. And so therefore, the DoD, due to security, due to things like that, are at a disadvantage out of the gate. And that's what we came around to get the idea of building a company like Epirus for, is that we need to build a defense contract or a defense prime that specifically thinks about these problems, that isn't going to throw the playbook out and say we're not going to deal with DOD at all anymore, that we still deal with DOD and we have to understand the high-level OODA loop, but within certain sorts of short-range air protection or certain sorts of different USVs in the sea, there are certain cases where a new type of weapon system needs to be brought to bear to go at these new type of threats. And so we need to meet the new types of threats with new type of weapon systems that are highly agile, highly able to counter distributed sort of swarm type threats, very software defined, leveraging consumer electronics. And that's what Epirus has set itself up to do just exactly, is to build those type of systems for defense. And Army being our number one kind of out of the gate customer, the RCTO, the Army Rapid Capability Critical Technology Office, led by a 3-star General Rash. That's our primary customer right now. They're chartered with most of base defense, not all base defense, but most base defense. And we're looking at implementing some of these directed energy systems as what they're calling the final protected fires layer. Because if you look at layered defense, you're going to see layers begin to emerge even within short-range air defense. Because that's part of the problem, is that the short-range air defense is looked at as a single slice or a single layer versus starting to stratify within that short-range air picture, because the types of threats, that's their landscape. That's where they play, is in the short-range air picture. And they play all sorts of different ways. They have all kinds of different ways of approaching, whether they're swarms, whether it's an ISR mission, whether it's a weapon mission, whether they have a Group 3 that looks like a poor man cruise missile. All of these different things are different scenarios that work differently within that short-range air defense. So layers are required, even within 10 kilometers. You can't consider that a single layer. You need to start looking at how those missions will be invoked and defended with these new types of weapon systems. And I include my brothers in the laser community, and I include even the systems like Thor where they make sense. But that analysis still is being done. It's not even done yet, still being done on the Army side. And I think anything we can do together to encourage that to increase pace and make sure that we're ready, because the threat is here. It just hasn't come to the States yet. And that's why, to your question way long time ago, you said, what about the COCOMs, this and that? Well, they're seeing these swarm threats today. And that's what's driving this very strong demand, which is accelerating the pace at which our systems are getting fielded.
So we only have a couple of minutes left. I'm going to ask you to wrap it up by addressing what Dr. Peterkin mentioned, which is that high-powered microwaves have been around for decades. You're talking about a new technology. So tell us, how is your system different from the past systems, and what does the future hold for Epirus and its application for the Department of Defense?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a corollary, and I'll go back to my old program, Next Generation Jammer. The predecessor to Next Generation Jammer was called ALQ-99. It was a great system built and designed in 1960s. It used vacuum-based amplifiers, horn antennas. It was highly missionizable and basically flew on the Prowler and the Growler for years and years and years. Did a great job. Big, fire-breathing horn of a system. But we replaced that system in the Navy with a software-defined, solid-state, gallium nitride infused phased array. Okay? That's what's right now being flown on the Growlers in the Next Generation Jammer. If you look at the SPY-6 radar, it's a gallium nitride phased array, super powerful transmitter that sits on board surface combatants, the SPY-6 radar. Okay, these systems are more or less TRL 9. These are TRL level 9 systems. We have architected other gallium nitride-based systems versus the older vacuum tube-based systems of old. And those systems have been tested and tested and tested and again the verdict that comes back is it's not ubiquitous enough. It doesn't stretch across enough targets. It doesn't have effects on enough things. Well, with the waveform agility that Dr. Peterkin talked about with solid state, we're able to create the right number of waveforms to affect the right number of targets. Proved that just in April out in China Lake with the Army, that we can hit a wide range of targets, just anything that boat motors, goggles, infrastructure, cellular phones or drones or USVs. All of those things are susceptible to this type of radiation, but in a certain sort of way, it's like picking a lock. Very akin to standoff electronic attack jamming with Next Generation Jammer. We're picking the lock of an IADS radar. It's very similar to that, although you're not going in the traditional front door ways of entry. You're coming in the back door. You're going right into the analog components, but in there, you're doing cyber attacks. You're basically attacking the electronics and making the system shut itself down. And that's what we've been able to master. And I think, as far as I know, Epirus is at the forefront of that particular advancement of that kind of technology. And so we're looking forward to continuing to partner with the DoD at large, with the Air Force. We have a developing program now on the heels of our Army program and our Army work that we've been doing. But we're very excited, and because of the urgency of this issue, I think we've been adopted very quickly into the sort of program of record lane, if you will. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. And thanks to everyone here. We are the only thing standing between everybody and a break. So please join me in thanking Andy Lowry, CEO of Epirus, for being with us today.